Welcome to the Experimentation Edge, where product managers, data scientists, and engineers talk about how they make smarter decisions. I'm Ashley Stirrup, the Chief Marketing Officer for GrowthBook, and in each episode, I'll sit down with an executive to unpack how they use experimentation and A/B testing to make better decisions. This show is sponsored by GrowthBook, the open source experimentation platform leader. Now let's jump in and get started with our next guest. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Experimentation Edge. We have Makram Mansour, head of marketplace at ID.me, here with us today. And Makram, you've got extensive experience in A/B testing. Maybe you could just share with us a little bit about your background before we jump in.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be available on the podcast. Yeah, I mean, the word experimentation really, came to life for me when I was working at LinkedIn. This is where I joined, I was part of LinkedIn's data team, and I got the opportunity to manage LinkedIn's experimentation platform and work with like different product teams across LinkedIn who are running experimentation and all the different needs. So I really started, getting into the science of it and the application of it across different use cases. As you know, with LinkedIn, the flagship, the LinkedIn.com or mobile, but also B2B use cases like for LinkedIn talent solutions, sales solutions, marketing solutions, and even worked on integrating experimentation or like budget split testing as the engine behind LinkedIn marketing solutions. And then I transitioned into Intuit, managing Intuit's experimentation platform and personalization as well. And then I got the charter of, we call it experimentation everywhere. So as a program. So I was spearheading that program at Intuit for both, again, TurboTax use cases, B2C, as well as the QuickBooks use cases. So really, an amazing world experimentation and how much I got to witness and see like experimentation is a key pillar of driving growth and ensuring sustainability. So sustainable growth for companies.
Yeah, that sounds super exciting. What was the kind of volume of experiments you were running, say, number of experiments per year at both places?
Well, at Intuit, like at LinkedIn, I mean, it was, 10,000 experiments across the platforms. I, I mean, I had 2,000 weekly active users logging into the experimentation platform itself. Imagine 2,000. The CEO of LinkedIn, I would see him logging in to see how the experiment is running and all of those. So heavy customer like experimentation obsession at LinkedIn for the real reason, because LinkedIn learned it the hard way. Um, Many examples you can find online of like how teams were just, feature flagging or releasing an experience, and then things happen badly. For example, the top ad banner on the top of LinkedIn, the designer decided, okay, I'm just gonna remove 5 pixels out of it, update it and release it. And then we had like the call to action, the ad $1 million drop in a month kind of thing. What's going on? Go and investigate, because when you have high traffic, every small, minute feature you think it's nothing, it becomes a big deal.
Yeah.
Another experiment, the people you may know, which is like the AI model that powers people you may know, the contacts at LinkedIn. The AI engineer changed, it tweaked an algorithm. And that caused like a ripple effect, which we call network effect or the butterfly effect on sessions for LinkedIn. And sessions is one of the top metrics for LinkedIn that dived down. So those were like the learnings, front end UI changes, back end, even AI or algorithmic changes that were a wake up call that nothing is gonna be deployed or released without an A/B test. You need to be very clear on why you're changing it. What's your hypothesis statement? What are the KPIs? What's your North Star metric? And what are the guardrail metrics? We need to be measuring them. So that was like a big learning for me. And similarly, working at Intuit for both for B2B QuickBooks or TurboTax, the growth teams, the product teams, embraced experimentation as a way of doing business. As you know, this is how we're going to operate. We have it's a practice of experimentation, and the pod teams. That is the right mechanism, rather than just okay, let's launch it. And I've seen situations where top down, like the hippo is saying, go do it, and how that was a bad idea, and how that led to negative customer impression. We could have an early spike of engagement, but that led to long-term effects. And at Intuit, there is something we have a principle called customer-driven innovation and design for delight. And experimentation is baked into it. So what does customer-driven innovation? It's like, we are obsessed with our customers, and we know what they want. We are doing a lot of interviews. We understand the job to be done by these customers, their workflows. So I talk a lot about that piece, because how are you feeding your ideas of experiments? Do you know your customers? How well do you know your customers? So there is an early research that's very important. And then there is like you build hypothesis and you run these experiments to learn, is the customer engaging? Because in many cases, customer might tell you what they want, but sometimes they might not. It's their behavior. And that's where experimentation is very important, because it captures the behavior, not only what the customer is telling you, which you could do in other forms of experiment, non-A/B tests, like non-statistical tests. So I've seen that spectrum, and I'm a strong advocate of experimentation is the true path for large-scale impact.
Yeah, it's very humbling when you realize how poor humans are at predicting what's going to move the needle up and what's going to move the needle down. It sounds like you've been at a couple of companies where they've seen the downsides and realized just how much you have to protect against that.
Exactly. And the true test of companies, in my opinion, or the leadership of companies, because many companies would say, hey, we are experimentation driven and everything. And the true test is, do they act on the results, or they just follow their own intuition at the end of the day? During COVID, for example, at LinkedIn, there is this, everybody was at home, and there was one startup who was doing like voice meetups. So one idea came, hey, we should do voice meetups inside LinkedIn messaging as an idea. And okay, leadership, that sounds great. This is a clubhouse or something. You remember that thing? So we ran a
Yeah.
test. Yes, so we ran an experiment. A small team quickly put it together, and we launched it. And it didn't work as anticipated. So now the question is, do you launch it? You invested resources, you put it together to launch it, but the metrics, the customers are not engaging with it. Do you keep it and hope it will get better, or do you kill it? And I feel that this is where the true test. And yes, we are not going to clutter the user experience. We're not going to keep these features who are hanging around, hoping customers will use them. No, we're going to kill them. Well, I've seen these kinds of great leadership polls where they are truly embraced experiments and the results that they're getting. Another example, LinkedIn hired a director of product from Instagram. And the first great idea when they joined is, we're going to put LinkedIn stories. I'm sure you've seen some of those LinkedIn stories examples. And yeah, I mean, the idea is great. It's working on other social platforms. Let's put it on LinkedIn and see. So again, that mindset of let's test it. We tested it, we launched it, and all of those. And again, it didn't work. Now remember, it could eventually work, but remember, it is taking a significant portion of your above the fold on mobile and all of those things, where something else could be much more impactful. And again, do we throw away this work that we invested maybe 2 quarters or something, and all of these engineers who are proud that they launched it? So this is the psychology that happens at enterprise or in companies. Because remember, I work on this. My performance review is anchored on it. Our old habits are about, I launch it, we do a major celebration, I put it in my performance review, I get promoted because of it. So the last thing that I want is my feature to get killed and released. So I had to work. So I'm talking to you about things that usually you don't hear when you hear about experimentation. I worked with HR to help revise the OKRs and KPIs of teams as well. Because if we don't address them, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that as you were talking about it, and like, how did you change the way people did reviews? Because people could do a great job building a feature that the feature just doesn't work, but that doesn't mean they didn't do good work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the challenge. That's a challenge. And different teams have different way of maturity towards that. And that's why, working with HR, how do we set our goals? And it is our goal is fail, learn, fail fast, learn, fail forward. Like for example, Intuit is amazing in terms of the fail forward approach. That's one thing that came out of the experimentation everywhere is the fail forward, because just like in life, uh, I went through my master's and PhD, and for me to get better is through doing all the mistakes. That's how I got to ace my exams. Is like I've done all of these problems and doing all the mistakes, and that's how you learn. So it is. So the concept is how fast can we learn, so that next time it will be a better iteration towards that best experience. So I don't believe in being lucky the first time. It's about this test and learn, doing it fast.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, how did they Intuit? How did they talk about that concept of fail forward? Like, how did they embed that in the culture?
So it's a matter of like at Intuit we have three pillars, and you need to have these three pillars standing for experimentation to be top the best in class. It's the people, process, and technology. Technology, we all are clear about it. You need to have best in class experimentation platform with all the bells and whistles, easy to use. But if you have even that, but not the other two, then it's like giving somebody a Ferrari car. They don't even know how to drive. They're gonna crash it, get themselves hurt. So then there's the people. People means about training the people, giving them the right support, how to use these tools, and give them in the process, giving them the support to innovate and to fail without standing in front of their leader and feeling like they have to justify themselves. So I had one dedicated track on leadership. So I had a bottoms up track for the experimentation program, but I also had a top down track, especially for leaders, people's managers, directors, VPs, SVPs, going all the way to the CTO office and getting help from them so that we are making sure that we have that coverage top down. And this is where companies, of course, depends on, there's a lot of aspects involved. For example, there's a quarterly earnings goal, and we have to meet some numbers and all of those things. So how do you really balance on all of those aspects of it? So there's a lot of things that are involved in this process.
Yeah, and I can imagine getting across the concept of humility was very important, and that product managers and having them kind of lead by example in terms of how they talk about what's getting built, all those things need to change.
Exactly. Now, fortunately for me, like AI helped a lot because with the wave that hit the company with AI, and so because you're getting two waves. One wave is we're changing our processes because we're really embracing AI the way we work. But there's also the wave that I am pushing, which is you need to start embracing experimentation. It needs to be part of how you operate as a team, how you launch. You're not launching and celebrating and causing that kind of bias. And I was also pushing towards MVP. I reached a point where I am not liking MVPs anymore, minimum viable products, because MVPs, the way they started and the way they are happening, unfortunately became too far. They got
Yeah.
stretched. Now MVPs, oh, we're still in MVP. We're still building it. Man, you've been building for 2 quarters, half a year, almost a year building the MVP, and you haven't tested. Well, that, in my opinion, is a big red flag. So that's where I started telling teams, where are your leap of faith? How did you validate your leap of faith assumptions? So I started pushing towards low fuzz. When you have an idea, you have these leap of faith assumptions that are like ticking bombs on your product or your feature. You need to devise a minimum viable test for them before you even go towards MVP and start building this big beast that otherwise you are already so much biased into this that you're going to launch it as a feature flag and pretend it's an A/B test. And it's going to be very hard for you to see reality, see what the data is telling you.
Yeah. And so in your role, it must have been very important to build strong relationships with these leaders.
Exactly. Yes. And understanding them. So again, this is where testing my PM skills, listening a lot, asking the whys, and all of those were very important and going deep into their workflow. So I treated them like my internal customers. Just like how we look at customers, I want to really understand. I usually have this iceberg to present customers. You have the tip of the iceberg on the top. That's how much you know about your customers.
Hmm.
There's a lot below that you still don't know. And we talk about spoken needs and unspoken needs. So even for these internal customers, I had to spend my time talking to them, their employees, how attend meetings to observe what's going on, document, to really and give feedback on how these things. And and then there is also like there are two bottlenecks in experimentation programs. We need to be very conscious about them. The first bottleneck is we don't have enough engineers because every experiment is taking a month or a quarter, depends. I'm talking about not like changing color of a button, but anything meaningful.
Right.
Or even if it's a front end, requires React components. Our components library doesn't support it. There's a lot of, and that's where it gets stuck with the engineering allocation. So there is bottleneck over there in setting up and launching the experiment. And another bottleneck is the data scientists. What I observe, teams who are like rich enough, who have their own headcount to have a data scientist in their team, they're running a lot of experiments. And teams who are not are just doing the basic stuff because they don't know how to set up the experiment. There's a lot of difficulty even because garbage in, garbage out. If they're not setting it right, they're not putting the right MDE efforts and all of those. So for me, I want to have experimentation everywhere in the company, which means even the teams who don't have. So as part of that, setting up a center of excellence team with like the central data scientists are very critical to unlock everybody. If you have any questions, here's a team or dedicated resources to help you. On the engineering aspect, embracing AI has been amazing unlocker for me and embracing the MVT. And it is okay not to have the engineering rigor. Like we can rapidly through like a code block. It doesn't need to be a component in our React component library for it to be launched because we're not launching. We're just testing it.
Hmm.
So I'm now seeing more and more like prompt-based experimentation and now with all of these uh, vibe coding. Well, this is like a dream come true now. Like we can test, especially front ends quickly without carrying the weight because it's only intended to let's test it and not
Yeah.
let's build it and then test it.
Yeah. I would imagine though that for a lot of people, that's a pretty big mind shift change from looking for MVP to looking for MVT. And so how did you help people think through, okay, you've got this huge idea. How do you turn it into the smallest possible MVT?
Yes, and I got fortunate to join a startup incubator team the nice thing, I got to interact with many teams and see what they're doing and their best practices. And the key learning I got was from the startup incubator team. And the team charter is, hey, we need to find this next $1 billion business for it. And rather than, so I joined that and we were forming this. How do we take an idea from an idea, which I call a cool idea? I wake up every day with 5 cool ideas when I wake up. But these are cool ideas. They're not good ideas. So how do we take those ideas and take them through a lightweight funnel to become good ideas with some data behind them? So we started putting together a lightweight process which even goes through like a Shark Tank approach.
Hmm.
Write together a one-pager of your idea. This way, you're serious. Before you talk to me, can you put it in writing? And then can you write a PRFAQ, the Amazon way of hypothetical press release? Imagine we build this business. How would like a company announce it? So we took it through these stages, and then the next stage would be a unit of one. Okay, so rapid prototype. So I own the unit of one phase, which means you're gonna rapidly prototype it with whatever mean you want. Like treat yourself like a one-man startup. How would these startups that today with AI are popping like mushrooms? That's how teams should be, even an enterprise, be operating. Like build it, rapidly prototype it, and then go and show it to one potential customer of your target audience, and let's see if they like it and they're willing to pay for it if they. So I took it through these funnel stages, and what we are doing, we are clearly listing down the leap of faith assumptions in this process and articulate them. Like, now everybody can do like a PRD with AI, the Google DeepMind, you can like do all of those. So there's a lot of tools in our hand that will help us surface these assumptions that are like ticking bombs, as I mentioned, in our plan. And then we can focus on them and see, and not necessarily everything needs to be an online controlled A/B test. For example, your market size could be, or your target audience could be a leap of faith assumption. So you could go back to your internal data or your customer feedback channel and be able to find evidence that it is indeed, like for example, I start with a TAM, SAM analysis for my market opportunity. But I could do a SOM, which is like a bottoms up from my existing QuickBooks user base. How many would be potential users of my product? So I could go do some digging in my data and see that. So once you start seeing your leap of faith assumptions and they are clear in front of your eyes, you can start be focused on them. And that's where the minimum viable test and see, okay, this is a test. Can I back it up with some data?
Yeah. Yeah, the thing I think that's so interesting about what you're talking about is there's kind of two types of features, right? There's one that's a small incremental change. Should we add a pop-up here? Should we open a new tab there? And then there's like entirely new features, like what you were talking about with, I think it was, they called it the live forums or live groups where they were talking. And like, that's a whole new feature, right? And in that case, you might get it wrong the first time, the second time, the third time, but might eventually be able to get it right. And you really need a different approach versus you're doing a small incremental change to an existing product and trying to see if that actually increased conversion. So it sounds like with your, the kind of the process you're laying through, it's helping people think through what are all the hidden assumptions in this new product idea and how do we test each one of those?
Exactly, and doesn't necessarily need to be like a completely new like product per se. Like many of the experiments I have seen are actually new ways of engaging with the user. For example, I worked with the QuickBooks marketing acquisition team. This is at the way top of the funnel where you have visitors who are visiting your, and that's where I think the biggest opportunity and challenge, because you have visitors. These are like, you don't have the user ID, you cannot target them and all of those. There's a lot of, and personalization is one of the key opportunities there. So how can we have some data, meaningful data, so that we can personalize and know their intent, so that we can surface that to them? And we build a lot of AI models over there. So there's a significant work to be done, even to set up an experiment. So now the question is, why are we even doing that? What evidence do we have that it is worth the effort? So this is where asking these questions up front and auditing the experience and like showing it around. Like I've seen teams where they build something, like for example, a customer get to know me flow, and it has like 7 steps of get to know me flow. And that thing got built for a few months and released, and then barely anybody used it.
Mm-hmm.
So the learning was, so we do a lot of retros after these experiments. Okay, so did we do any internal design review? Did we show these 7 steps to certain like user testing or maze.co or one of those did we get this? No, we didn't. We quickly, because okay, the easy path is we have our engineers, we have CMS platform, let's go build it and test it, all of this. Well, okay, so we need to think through this more. So it depends on the team's maturity and how they do and what's available for them. Sometimes they skip some of those, and those are very expensive learnings. So personalization, in my opinion, is a critical pillar, a growth pillar for companies, because that's how we look into every user and we're not treating all users the same. And experimentation on top of that is very important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I would imagine there's lots of different types of personalization, and some of them could be very relevant to the users and others would not. And so making sure you're really thoughtful about that sounds like it's really important as well.
Exactly. And also, you need to be thoughtful not only about their business goals, but the customer and your don't do harm activities. So you really need to you need to be paranoid. The thing is, so for example, when I was at LinkedIn, um, everybody thinks about the growth team and the growth metrics. They're already in our platform. We can measure them. The problem is the guardrail metrics. We're not having enough of those. We have guardrail metrics in terms of engineering excellence, the site speed kind of metrics and all of those, the tickets. That's standard. But what you don't have, and what we started realizing, as you are putting more AI into the picture, well, those are not cheap. There's a lot of, there's an infrastructure team who's taking the bill, but the growth teams who are all over, they think it's all free money that they can just run it. So they would be optimizing for the ROI is terrible. Like you're burning $1 million to make $1,000 over here, kind of thing. So, but
Hmm.
they don't see it in the experimentation platform. So I worked with the team that is who's getting the cost to do the allocation, make it a metric so that they are able to see how much they're burning money so that they can make a better informed decision. So this is what I call checks and balances in the system when you are introducing that. Another aspect is the compliance, the ethics department, all of those. So, for example, when I was at LinkedIn, of course, diversity and inclusion is very important. One of the beautiful things about LinkedIn versus other social platforms is you don't see negativity at LinkedIn. You don't, even you only see heart, thumbs up. You don't see thumbs down, for example, like other platforms. There is a
Hmm.
reason for that. It's very important. So, how can we take these qualitative metrics and make them quantitative? So one initiative I had with with that team, how can we make sure when we're releasing new features at LinkedIn, they are not skewed to men versus women, for example? So how can we put that metric and we measure that, and so those are some of the I work with the data science team to make them measurable, and that's again when you see the power of the checks and balances and the experimentation platform becoming that. So when you hear companies like LinkedIn at the top of the pyramid and embracing them, because they are not only running experiments. It's not chasing numbers, it's chasing good quality experiments, which are they move the needle the right way with the right checks and balances with it.
Yeah. And when you were talking about that kind of the ROI before, were you talking about like the cost of actually running the experiment or the cost of developing the feature and running the experiment?
And so there are two, like you mentioned. That's why developing the feature, we can do that, and we're pushing for MVTs, minimum viable tests, so that we're not putting the cart in front of the horse. But no, what I'm talking about ROI is we're running that feature running online on the cloud. So we do if this feature gets ramped to 100%, how much would our infrastructure cost would be for people who are
Mm,
clicking on it, an AI model is running on it? How much that would be our running cost? Because it's
got it.
all adding, whether it's Amazon, it's adding up our Amazon or Google Cloud bill or Cloud,
Right.
whatever AI model bill. And now, because we're seeing AI native products, which means we're going to have a lot of AI intelligence into our products, in addition to all those propensity models and all of these like models that are running, all of this stuff is not cheap.
Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, no, that's true. It does introduce a whole additional layer of cost over just traditional infrastructure when you're starting to having to pay for AI tokens.
Exactly. Yes.
So, in your current role, how have you brought your learnings from Intuit and LinkedIn into your current role?
Oh, big time. Now, unfortunately, the team is like analytics and data driven. And
Mhm.
now we are at a point where we are like making significant changes. Like, for example, our to the experience and expanding and growing. We're introducing like the mobile app. So there's a lot of 0 to 1 functionalities that we are introducing. And this is the golden opportunity to do it through a safe manner through A/B testing. So we are bringing that, we're onboarding to that tool, leveraging, the data warehouse directly, defining our customer journey, the all the events that we want to, or we're revisiting everything from the scratch. So it's going through that journey. What are our KPIs? And like, for example, like 2 weeks ago, I put together the vision to values for the marketplace. One thing I really loved and learned from LinkedIn, the previous CEO of LinkedIn was a champion of it. Forget his name. It's called the vision to values. Every team should have what's your vision? What's that ideal state? What's your mission towards that? Who's your audience when you're building a product? Are you clear about your audience? If you're a marketplace, who are your producers and who are your consumers, and prioritize those audiences? These basics, but these are essentials. Is everybody on the same page on them? What's your strategy towards them? Because we're not like flipping coins here. The wind blows this way, we go that way. So because sometimes I see experimentation like, okay, I wake up today, I have this cool, I hear this guy's talking, we're gonna go this direction. Like this means that you don't have a strategy, you don't have a plan. And what do you know what are your metrics? What's your North Star? The lagging indicator metric. What's your leading indicator, the signpost metrics? If these things move up, this is eventually going to move up. And what are your guardrail metrics? Are you clear on them? Are you measuring them? Or are you flying blind and assuming? So setting the basics is very important for you to have an experimentation program on top of that.
Yeah, and it must really require that you understand the business well to help them translate. Usually, most businesses it's kind of complicated, and
Mhm.
you want to grow revenue or whatever, but you don't necessarily know what your true North Star metric is. So helping the whole organization get aligned around that must require a lot of learning on your part when you come into a new org.
Exactly. And I take advantage of me being new to just, take advantage. Hey, I'm new here. Excuse my silly question, but, so I take it to the big, and I think I learned it from Intuit. It's called the meet and greet. So I go meet with people. Can you ask who are the 3 other people I need to be? And I take advantage of it because it's a golden opportunity for me to ask questions, ask why a lot, and get those and build the relationships.
Yeah. Wow. So we're starting to run out of time. So last question is: let's say it was someone who was coming into a role like yours, but they're newer in their career. It's at a company that maybe hasn't really bought into experimentation yet, but some of the leaders think maybe it's a good idea. How do you come in and help, you know, an experimentation program grow and come to life?
Yes, like with everything, crawl, walk, run, and fly. Don't go after the low-hanging fruit ones, the ones that are like don't try to fix everything. So, for example, hey, we don't have tracking, we have only event track. Okay, great. Let's go with these, and let's just it's like exercising your muscles. You're building a habit here, and you cannot go after the tough one. So with whatever is available, even some simple uh, front end changes, kind of experiment, go and do it, see success. And I am a strong believer in like uh, you know feeling accomplishment after accomplishment will get you there. Nobody climb the ladder all the way on the top quickly. Just take these, maybe it is that commitment, and these small wins matter a lot. So follow the same approach. That's how I've seen it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I suspect, given everything you've told us today, that building those relationships in parallel, obviously you want to build on the back of wins, but you have to start building relationships as soon as you walk in the door. So that sounds like it's equally important while you're doing that.
100%, yes. How you approach, come curious, help, scratch someone's back, they're going to scratch your back. Learning that, plus one attitude. I mean, I always tell teams, engage, support each other. You'll get, do good, good will come back to you. It is, these relationships are extremely important. And I learned it because in my career, I was an engineering manager before. I was a people's manager. But of course, product managers, they don't have direct authority. We learned that we need to expand our sphere of influence, we call it. Sphere of influence means being able to influence others to do the work, even though they don't have authority to do it. So how do you build that relationship? Successful product managers know that. And now we need to share that knowledge. So not only product managers, engineers, data scientists, it comes against our nature sometimes as technical people, but we need to do it. Realizing that, again, relationships and team building, you cannot, yes, we have this team of one now with AI, but even with that, you need the PR to be reviewed with someone and all of those. So you need that relationship and be conscious and invest in it.
Yeah. It just comes back to good old people, process, and technology. And you got to bring the
Yes.
whole organization along with you. So
Yeah, I mean, over communicate. Sometimes I feel that I keep emphasizing over communication. Use Slack, or whatever Teams or thing. Use it. Like share what you're. Don't be shy. Sometimes I like lead by like I I I Slack a lot, and like I give updates a lot, and people tell me, Makram, thank you for keeping us in the loop. Keeping us in the loop is a very important thing. Keep everybody in the loop of what's going on. Don't let people think what's going on, assume they know. They don't know.
yeah. Well, this has been just chock full of great lessons learned. So, Makram, I want to thank you so much for joining the show today. It's been a wonderful time.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, please support our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Better yet, share the episode with a friend. I'm Ashley Stirrup with Growth Book. We'll see you next time on the Experimentation Edge.